Recording in progress.
All right, welcome everyone. We are starting today with our elections canvassing board meeting, and it will be brief, and we have the city clerk here to start us off. But first of all, I will officially call the meeting to order, and we need to do roll. All right, Ms. Kaisel, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Keen.
Here.
Councilmember Bransford.
Here.
Councilmember Wall is absent. Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Here.
Councilmember Palmer.
Here.
Councilmember Dennis.
I see her entering.
Okay. Council President Carlson.
Here.
And Mayor Norton is absent.
All right, thank you for that. Just ask for a quick motion to approve the order of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, we are moving on to our reports and recommendations, which is the canvass of the November 5th, 2024 election results. And I will turn it over to our city clerk, Kelly Giesler. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. Am I okay at this distance from the mic?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Council President, council members. Like you said, we're here today to canvass the results of the November 5th general election. Just a quick procedural note for all of you. Once we complete this, we'll take a short break and I'll have those who are going to sign. We'll sign the resolution, and that'll also give our team a chance to do the AV switch over for the study session, and then you all can get started with the study session. First of all, we're just going to take a quick spin through the numbers. And these are the numbers that you'll also see in our resolution that are required to be reported out to the Secretary of State. So voter turnout was, we had 76,248 registered voters at 7 a.m. on election day. There were 65,265 total votes cast, 6,167 persons registered at the polls on election day, 27,350 regular military and overseas absentee and mail ballots were cast. 178 federal office only absentee ballots were cast, and 1 presidential absentee ballot was cast. And we had an incredible 45 polling locations with 825 election judges working on what, for all intents and purposes, was a pretty great day as far as election administration goes, very smooth. The results of the election came out as Councilmember-at-large Randy Schubring, Ward 2, Nick Miller, Ward 4, Andrew Friedrichs, Ward 6, Dan Doring. Wonderful, got it right. And that's really it. And before I wrap up, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of our city partners that help us in this effort, our parks and maintenance and public work teammates that help us with signage and help us with golf carts and all sorts of different things, putting out cones. Olmsted County Elections, who is our partner in this effort, RPD and Emergency Management, they spun up an incredible command station that day. And even though we didn't really have any events to note, we were ready, and I love readiness and quiet when they go together. So obviously my team, Christanne Cartwright, Ann Kazel, Candace Cash in particular, who did an incredible job. And then of course, all of our election judges who continue to come back election after election and support the democratic process. So we really thank them for that effort. And that's it. Questions?
Just second the thank you to your team and to our partners and to the volunteers. Any questions?
I didn't even advance my slides.
Otherwise, a motion, or do you have a question, Councilmember?
Yeah, I just want, looking at the motion, this is a question for the city clerk. We are signing the abstract report declaring the results. If there is any sort of contested thing that goes to, is that a different path than this, or is this path slowed or changed by this?
Council President Carlson, Councilmember Keen, thank you for that question. I actually did reach out to the Secretary of State's office today to get clarification on that process. And that it was confirmed what I thought was already the truth, which is, and you can find it in state law in many places, that this is in effect a ministerial function where we're just certifying that the count has been completed and what the count is. And that contested results of any kind, any sort of district court filing, actually cannot even move forward without the completion of this process. So this is a part of the process that's required by the state, and it has to happen. So that is the Secretary of State's advisement.
Thank you for that clarification. That helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was going to say, based on that, I want to make a motion to adopt the resolution and signing the abstract and declaring the results of the November 5th general election for council member at large, as well as city council reps for Ward 2, 4, and 6.
Okay, point of order. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Dennis to start this part off, but I will accept the motion in the second. So go ahead, Councilmember Dennis, for questions.
Yeah, I had some more questions, so I'd like to. Okay, so I too have spent actually over an hour on the phone with the Minnesota, the Secretary of State, and so what I know there was a petition brought forth for a situation where there was a candidate who there was question about whether or not they lived in the ward that they were running for. And so what I had heard was the statute 209, Minnesota statute 209. So 7 days after this vote, people can contest with an election, the election results. So I know there is a way for people in the community to, within 7 days, very strict, to contest the results of the election for any issue. But I always feel it's easier to fix a mistake before it's made.
Mm-hmm.
And so if these, I guess I hear what you're saying, and like I said, I've talked to several people at the election department here. I've talked to people at the county attorney's office. So I have talked to a lot of people who've given me the statutes that people can go by. But by voting here, aren't we saying that we believe it was illegal, everyone abided by the law, and that there wasn't any?
No. This is, I don't know how else to put it than say that it's a very basic proceeding that just says that the count has been completed and that the count is accurate based on the information that was taken in on election day and printed off from every tabulator. So it's just about the count. The validity of anyone's candidacy or anything else is a separate lane. And like I said, any contestation can't even occur without saying that the count is complete. You can't contest something that's not complete. So that's the order of things according to state statute, not my opinion or anything.
Okay. 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 Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right, so we are moving on to the motion in the second. Councilmember Keen, you have the floor if you'd like.
I'll just add that, again, I know what the work went on with the county. I recently participated with the county as their canvassing and represented the city there as the largest government unit within the thing. And I feel very confident on the numbers being presented to us, but also across the entire county and the process behind it and how we get to these numbers and how we cross-reference them and make sure it's not just, depending on tabulating machines or anything like that. So I have great confidence in the process and in the numbers in front of us.
I think that was well said. I know that there are concerns in the community about a particular candidate's residency, and I share some of those concerns, but that would not disrupt my approval of the process. So thank you, Clerk.
And Council President Carlson, may I just add, and to Councilmember Dennis's point about a petition, it's really an election complaint form. And I just think it's important that it's clear that that complaint form was filed on behalf of anonymous information that came into our office and was filed by our office. Because I've seen various narratives that say otherwise or think that we're kind of sitting on our hands. And we have followed the law to the letter of the law. We reported what we knew to the proper jurisdictional authority, which is the county. And that's what happens from there is out of my hands.
Yeah.
So
That
I
was
just want
important
that to be
know.
clear.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion? Councilmember Dennis?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and let me tell you, I definitely do not think the process and the system is doing justice. It's the difficulty it is to fight this in court is a lot more of a process than not having a mistake done in the first place. I believe that if the results, if if people if it's legal to start out with, then we would have, you know, I just think, I'm sorry, I'm not wording this well, because I have a lot of things prepared, a lot of research. Several residents have huge concerns, sent me information, and like I said, I've spent an incredible amount of time on the phone with different departments, seeing the you're a complaint form that's 200, 201, 203.B, 204.C, 206 are all the statutes that deal with the complaint form. That was sent to the county attorney's office, which said that it was taken care of, but did not talk about any investigation or any kind of things that was done to look into the issue that was brought to them. So I feel that due diligence wasn't followed necessarily, because and this is a lot of work to contest things. So I don't think I can ethically vote for a results of the election if the person who was on the ballot potentially should not have been on the ballot to begin with. You can't represent the city of Rochester not living within the city limits. You can't represent your ward not living within your ward. If things were done the way it is, because I know there's a sworn affidavit that all elected everyone who's running for office has to fulfill. So under perjury of law, you have to swear that you live with your family in that ward. And so there was several complaints brought to my attention and information that I visually saw, that I feel that if the law was abided by, that perhaps it'd be a different election results in the general election. So because of what I have researched and what I have found out, I just can't vote to certify the results of the election without knowing that there was a proper investigation done to make sure that it was a legal election. So thank you.
Any other discussion? Ready to vote? All right, so all in favor of the original motion to approve the canvassing results for the 4 positions, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion carries 5-1 with Councilmember Dennis voting nay. Thank you, clerk.
Adjourn.
We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned for the canvassing board. We will take a few-minute recess and start the study session shortly.
Playing this position in Cottage Grove. You know anyone up there?
Recording stopped.
Easy. It's like
Recording in progress.
Aaron Parrish will start us off in this presentation.
President, members of council, this is the second verse, same as the first.
Say it again.
Yeah, so, President, members of the council, this is the second verse, same as the first. You recall, we went through an original conversation around the phase one recommendations. Overall, there's about $5.3 million in public safety aid that was allocated by the state. Previously, you approved about $4.4 million in phase one investments. And what we're bringing forward to you is a collective recommendation around the remainder of those. As you can see on the screen, there's a number of eligible uses and some things that specifically are not allowable. And then that also reflects your initial investments that were made back in February. Really just a few things that are being recommended here, and I think they're strategic investments, but as you know, the budgeting process, is a lot of conversations happened around that, and some of these things actually will be helpful to that in the future in terms of investing in things that we would otherwise have to pay for, but for this funding. And so I think this allows us to be good fiscal stewards. So I will maybe advance me. There we go. So as we look at the different options, I think one that you're familiar with, you've invested in the Axon sort of platform for the PD. They're really on the cutting edge of utilizing this for any number of different things, for body cam to records. And they're getting really ready to see some of the benefits of that investment in technology. I know they've worked very hard on getting through the implementation process, but that is a limited term agreement. By extending that out now and fixing our pricing, we can actually, through a modest investment at this point, leverage future costs out into year 7, out to year 7 in this contract. And so, it's a really wise thing to do, and it gives you a longer time horizon for what your costs are and fixing those. As we've done benchmarking with other agencies, we're definitely very competitive, and we feel like we're in a good position to deliver, on this product, and are, leveraging it to the maximum extent possible at a lower cost than what many other agencies are seeing through our collaboration with that group. Secondly, through some evolution in OSHA standards, we are required to provide additional turnout gear to our firefighters. So this would provide additional investment in that area. So that's $140,000, and really just, it's really part of a fire safety initiative. So allowing folks, if they are on a fire scene, to come and change out into new clothing while their other clothing's going through a good washing process. And so I think this is in line with some of our safety and wellness initiatives. And so really a good use of those fundings. Emergency management at about $93,000. We have a vehicle that is currently not depreciated, and some other limited needs in that area. And so as we sort of go with this new collaborative emergency management model, this is just sort of truing up some expenses that we have there, and really appreciate, the strong partnership that's happening between the PD and fire in terms of our delivery of emergency management services. And then last but not least, we are recommending about $293,000 for the fit out of the space that is currently unbuilt over at Station 2. You might remember back at the rec center, we had kind of a similar unbuilt out space. And this would allow us to do something similar there, to get it into a usable condition for temporary use by emergency management, so they don't have to do all the setup and tear down. It just gives us and extends out the flexibility of that space in the future. If we want to have a backup dispatch location or relocate dispatch there, it also gives us the opportunity to do that, but really extends that out. And just as by way of example, we're 80% across the line with this space. Oh, that's great on my computer, but I'm not hooked up. So there we go. So you can kind of see some pictures. These weren't included in the packet, but I just thought it'd be helpful as a visual reference to say, if we can get the concrete in and get the walls built out and some light mechanical work, we'll be in a good position to utilize this space. By the way, probably won't recommend leaving the floors undone in the future. Not the easiest thing to do after the building's occupied, but something that is helpful, I think, for the overall utilization of that building. And then finally, we are proposing a few phase 1 reallocations. So if you think about your original $200,000 that was to be invested for community impact in the PD, looking at reallocating $100,000 of that, $50,000 to the ongoing piloting and collaboration with the CERT group, And, based on a contract that would be developed there. And then another $15,000 to support the efforts of our community service team that Captain Turk also heads up. And then lastly, some additional funding for piloting 2 flat cameras, which, sort of this intelligence-led and driven policing effort that the PD is really embracing. So with that, we have all the experts in the room to answer questions that you have, and certainly happy to answer any others. This is a little bit unique. This is on next week's council agenda for you all to consider. But because of the Wednesday meeting, it's posted in the packet. If you all have different ideas and all that, we will make changes to the packet. So.
All right, thank you for that. This looks like a good list to me. Great to see some community investments and investments in technology and just updating our needs. Any other discussion? Councilmember Keen?
A couple things just to check on. On the fire turnout gear, is there any impact to this with fire protection being the PFAS kinds of stuff that we were using? Is this any sort of concept of retiring some of that, or that doesn't address any of this at all?
Yeah, I don't think it does, but Holly helped me out here. I think, really that's for the suppression. I think this is really for like carcinogens that can get on the equipment
Okay,
for
it's
fires,
not-
but.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Keen, Council President, members of council. No, this does not address any of the PFAS concerns. I think the industry is, I don't want to speak out of turn, but still working on that. This is, the department strives to provide 2 sets of turnout gear for all of our members, and we've OSHA has started to enforce a hard line on a 10-year expiration date for gear. So unfortunately, we had to cycle out a large number of our sets of turnout gear. And so this is an effort to get us back whole. So those folks have 2 sets of turnout gear, just like Deputy City Administrator Parrish said. So when one set is dirtied, they can put that in the laundry and still be available for service with a clean set that's not continuously exposing them to carcinogens.
Okay, thank you. But just to make sure I understand this right, Deputy Administrator said that most of the PFAS is in fire suppressant. Is there anything in this turnout clothing? Is there no PFAS material in there?
I can't say that. I think that's still under question. I don't have that information.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then on the, just on the Exxon again, I've been supportive of this investment. I think we've been doing a good job with it, but I'm reading the way this is portrayed to me, and I am not committing other funds into the future. Is that accurate? Am I, by making this, did I commit to a higher fund balance in 2027, or we'll have those decisions to make in the future?
Yeah, I think you are ultimately, in the future budgets, you will have some additional, costs, but it's also not inconsistent with what you might expect as part of that. But I'll maybe let Chief Franklin speak to that a little bit more specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. Technically, you're not necessarily in this document, but we do have an RCA on the table to approve that very same thing that you're talking about. So what we're doing here and what we have done is, in essence, we've had an opportunity here to renegotiate our current deal. We're in the third year of a 5-year contract. In essence, what they're offering today is allow us to lock in 2024 pricing for the next 7 years. We've had the creative opportunity here to take and leverage these funds to make it budget neutral in 25 and 26, but there will be a one-time budget levy increase impact in 2027. Now, the important thing to remember there is that budget levy increase is going to come whether we do this deal or not. It's just a matter of, do we want to lock in the 2024 pricing now, or do we want to wait? And I guarantee it will be much higher if we wait.
Yeah, and again, just to make sure you understand me correctly, I do appreciate trying to do this. I understand why a company would want to do this. I appreciate that it's coming from this one-time funding. I just want to understand if I've committed us to a higher thing in the future. And I think your answer is probably. Now, how we address that in the future through trade-offs and other things, that's a decisions to come. But we are like indirectly agreeing to higher yearly things in the out years by making this agreement in 2024.
Yes, that is correct in spirit. Are we having the conversation today at a cheaper rate, or are we going to have it in the future at a more expensive rate is really what it's going to come down to.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
And then just for Deputy Administrator Parrish, there's a slight, my charts I have kind of cut off at the bottom of the sheet. I see the $20,000 for the for fire training or Lexipol. And then I see the thing about alternate police service, but I don't have the 200,000. I don't think I have I don't have anything about piloting 2 flock cameras. That just didn't make my charts. Is that just
Yeah,
an
it must have been
administrative
just
problem?
yeah, I think that must have just gotten cut off in the conversion to a PDF or what have you. But what is reflected up on the screen for you is what the recommendation and what the requested city council resolution next week
And-
would have reflected.
And just so we're communicating, it says reallocation, but we had an allocation in the first pilot of 200,000. This is really just dictating how we're spending that same 200,000, or is it?
That's correct.
Okay, it's more of a level of detail.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, I just want to note too that while we have our fire department represented here by the deputy chief, that we do have a ceremony this evening at 5:30 acknowledging our recruits' graduation and awards and promotions, and I am not able to attend, but just wanted to send and share our best wishes to that group tonight. All right, well, then I think we will wrap this item up and move on to our second agenda item. Yeah, no. All right, Mr. Cartwright, are you taking us through the special 2 a.m. liquor license endorsement conversation?
I am.
All right,
Just
welcome.
Give me a moment. I'll do wait for slides. There we go. Council members, Council President, Mayor Norton's absent. Earlier this year, some questions arose about getting a dialogue going about the currently existing 2 a.m. liquor licenses within the boundaries of the city of Rochester. So what I've put together for you all is just kind of a high-level overview of how it currently exists, what are the objective advantages of it, what are the objective costs of it, and just really looking for policy guidance in terms of what are the next steps. Is this just an informational gathering session, or what does the council need from the office of the city clerk regarding 2 a.m. licenses? So back in 2003, the legislature extended liquor licensing from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., allowing for an additional time for bars to be to be open. So what that means is that particularly exclusive street bars, which are entities that exist primarily for the sale of liquor, could, through the Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Division, apply for a special type of licensure, should their individual municipalities allow it, to be open for that extra hour. That being said, when a business is granted a liquor license, their default time of closing is 1 a.m. They have to ask for an additional endorsement to be open until 2 a.m. So the city of Rochester, along with multiple other municipalities, which I'll get to at the end of this presentation, does allow for that extra hour. And so 8 businesses at this time have allocated themselves to have 2 a.m. liquor sales. So those businesses, as it exists today, are Rochester Galaxy Cinema, The Workshop, LC's Venue Downtown, Crave Restaurant, North Star Bar, Kathy's Pub, the Mayo Civic Center behind you, and Corona's Tacos. So why? Why do these 8 businesses want to be open for an extra hour? In conversations with some of these businesses, what we have found is that it is an incredibly lucrative time for those businesses, that the period of time between 11:30 p.m. and 2 a.m. is where they make a significant amount of money, particularly during the summer hours. Again, if you go back and you look at the composition primarily of the businesses that elect to be open until 2 a.m., they are primarily bars whose main focus is the sale of alcohol, whether that be cocktails, other types of drinks, other elements. Sometimes there's music associated with them, but they are not primarily or usually restaurants. In there, we obviously have, for example, Crave, which has a bit of a special place because it exists within Hotel Indigo. We have the Mayo Civic Center, which is well, it's an entertainment venue, and we have one of our cinemas, which sometimes has late night screenings. But fundamentally, at the heart of it, it is bars that elect to do this, and you will find that same pattern throughout the state. When you get a little bit more granular about the advantages fiscally for these entities, you find that they make up a significant amount of their revenue and their sales. If you look at this slide above, you'll see that for one business, for example, 25% of their sales annually comes between that period of time. For another, it's about 30%. So when these bars consider coming to the city of Rochester, this is a fundamental calculation for their business model, because were this to be removed, we're talking about a significant impact on their revenue streams. We're talking about 400 to 500,000 per annum for some businesses. Real decisions that they would have to make about staffing, about the continuation of their operations, about how they're going to exist within the parameters of the city. The other thing is that for their employees, whilst they are paid by hour, primarily they make a lot of their money through tips. And the vast majority of their tips come through that period of time, as I said before, 11:30 to about 2 a.m. Another element, sorry, let me go back quickly. Another element that I did want to bring to everyone's attention is back in 2019, and then earlier this year, we updated our fee schedule, primarily as an inflationary rate measure, but also to align with other municipalities of similar size for liquor licensing. And so that fee schedule was reflective of a model that exists with other municipalities of the same size, which is 2 a.m. licensure. And again, these things do come together. 30% of their revenue streams come from that time frame. An increase in the fees also occurred. That was considered in an environment where 2 a.m. licensure existed within the parameters of the city of Rochester. Another thing that I would like the council to consider as we continue having a dialogue is that many of these businesses do exist within the special service district, which typically means that they have greater annual expenses. And so keeping up with those expenses, being able to pay for the cost of being in that special district would again be impacted were we to choose to remove that extra hour, which accounts for that large amount of their revenue. So that's the advantages. And the primary beneficiaries of this are the business themselves, the patrons that obviously frequent them, and some of the auxiliary sources in terms of whether that's communities that come out later at night or just the general framework, maybe university students, of individuals that want to have things to do later at night within the city of Rochester. But like with anything, there are trade-offs and there are costs. So what are the regulatory effects of having bars open late into the night? So this table in front of you is our dispatch numbers from the Rochester Police Department. And what you see here is data that comes from November of 2023 up until this month, well, up until last month, sorry, October. So if I'm to kind of work you through from left to right, what we're looking at is between the 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. hours, these are the total amount of hours that are worked by officers, the hours that they are dispatched onto the streets, the incidents that they've had to respond to, and then the percentage available. And I want to take a second to talk about that percentage available. What that number means is the time that an officer is parked in a car or parked and available to respond to a call. And so the lower that number is, that means that the more the officers are actually engaged with doing something else and thus not able to respond to other calls. And so what we'll be looking at here is the time where the months where our officers are the most busy during that period of time are March, April, May, these are not surprising dates, June, October, and then a little bit more in June and July. To get even more granular, there we go. We can go into the days. The data here is the same in terms of the way that the tables are formulated. But what I want to point your attention to is Saturday and Sunday being the days where the availability of the officers are at their very lowest, particularly during the months of May through October. If you look at that figure, we're seeing 15.85%. So that is really where the greatest, for lack of a better word, cost in terms of staff time, in terms of officer time, is focused. During those summer months, Sunday morning, so again, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. Sunday morning, our officers are likely often deployed, working and doing things related to operations that are occurring, incidents that are occurring with bars or associated effects, particularly because as we look through all of the other information throughout the days, we find that there's not a similarly associated drop-off, but Saturday nights are a day where most people are out, most people are consuming alcohol, most people are doing and having events, and thus it is also a time where we see the highest amount of police incidents in terms of their ability to not respond to dispatches because they are already out on the street doing work. So what are they doing? Here is a list of the different violations that we're seeing, because again, what I do not want us to do is to make an assumption about what that 15% means. Does it mean that they are exclusively working at the bars? That is not what I want us to draw a conclusion from until we've looked at what they are responding to during this course of time. And so this is what we're looking at. We are seeing the highest rates of incidents for disorderly conduct, followed by alarm incidents, which is just within businesses where things have gone off. Then we have trespasses, and this is particularly prevalent downtown at the bars, where those bars themselves are actually calling the officers for individuals that are being belligerent, that they want removed from the premises. Then we follow through with suspicious circumstances, community service actions, and intoxicated persons. We also have medical issues, medical situations where individuals could either be having heart attacks, falling over, hurt, have fallen because of ice, a whole host of reasons where our police department is called out and help and give assistance.
Clarifying question, Mr. Cartwright, is this for just downtown or is this citywide?
Thank you. This is primarily just for the downtown area. So this is for the downtown areas where these incident rates are coming from.
And same with the previous charts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So was there any other clarifying questions before I move on? Yes, Councilmember
Patrick?
Thank you. Dram shop law, is that still a thing?
Tell me more about the dram shop law you're thinking about.
Well, I remember learning about it in business law class when Mr. Jim Miner was my teacher at JM. And I remember him just saying something like, if you get really drunk at a bar, it's really the bar owner's responsibility, not yours. There's supposed to be a responsibility for that vendor, for that venue to watch the people and not serve once they get past a point. Do we have some kind of a...
So let's get into a little bit of the weeds of liquor licensing. So the way it works is that every entity that gets a liquor license in the city of Rochester has to have special types of liability insurance, dram shop liquor liability insurance, which is slightly different from your general liability insurance, because to your point, what it does is once you can prove and point back where the incident occurred, or where the serving, for the liquor occurred, that kind of flowed out from all of the things that happened, where the actual incident happens then becomes less important. And the person that's, for lack of a better word, on the hook is the business that served. So using an example of, heaven forbid, but a DUI incident that could cause a crash, the liquor liability would flow back to, let's say, whatever entity, whatever business was last serving that person who had consumed the alcohol. And thus it would be kind of a, so what I'm looking for, competition of insurances, because you would have the motor vehicle insurance of the person who obviously crashed, who would then be having negotiations and conversations with the liability insurance of the actual entity that served the liquor. But that would be, we would be basically the facilitators of that arbitration process, where we would say, here's the liquor liability information, here's what needs to be done. And we would provide that information. And then from there, the legal process would flow outward. So that's the liability portion of it. In terms of security, entities that have or want to have a 2 a.m. liquor license, one of the things that has to happen is that they have to provide us with a security plan. They have to provide us with information about how they plan to have operations later in the night. Now, sometimes what could happen is they could partner with our police department. They could have an informal relationship with our police department, or very often they have to provide their own security plan with their own hired officers or individuals who may be off duty or who are private entities or private entrepreneurs who have to pass the muster with our police department before we would approve their 2 a.m. licensure. So they do have to have their own level of security. But even with all of that, things happen. And in terms of just making sure that we are having a relatively safe community, our officers are still hovering, dispatch ready and prepared and willing to kind of intercede when things occur. Is that?
It does, thank you. Just a little jump on there with a extra question. How much data are we accepting or do we ask for requiring from RPD? Certainly their opinions and the data they get at an arrest or a site visit or when they, issue a disorderly or any of those other things. How much of their data is being taken into effect to help us to drive those decisions that we're making to guide businesses? You said that bouncers have to pass muster for RPD's, criteria,
Mhm.
but are we gathering more data? It would seem that RPD knows a fair amount about what's going on, and are we really acknowledging that, or have we done deeper surveys to hear more about what they're saying in this?
No. So what typically occurs, if you want to cast your mind back maybe even about a year and a half ago, is we had an incident with one of our businesses that did not meet the muster for security arrangements. And we put them on a probationary agreement. And they basically were not able to have general entertainment endorsement. They were not able to operate late at night because we were having a lot of issues with fights and other entities basically going on within their parking lot. So what typically happens with the Office of the City Clerk is when things rise to a level of that concern is when we do intercede. But in terms of actually going in and getting data from RPD about each of these 8 businesses, are we finding that there's a pattern? Are we finding that you are consistently having to be deployed out? Are we finding that there's a lot of disorderly conduct that's happening at this particular enterprise? We are not seeing that particular information right away. But what does happen in our processes is every year when they renew, they do have to go through, the business have to go through a background check. They have to be signed off by RPD. So if any of these businesses were to rise to a level that did cause grave concern from our police department, that would be an avenue where they would reach out to our office and say, we might recommend that you put them on probation, or that we want to call them in, or that we have found that their security plans have not really been very good, and we want to re-examine it. So there's some safeguards there in that way, but in terms of actually having a full-on sit down similar to this and grabbing this data and saying, where is all of the alarms happening, where are all the trespasses happening? No, we've not had that conversation. No problem. Okay. So I said I'd get to this, which is other jurisdictions. So the large municipalities in the state all allow 2 a.m. liquor licenses. You have to get pretty far down the list before you start to see entities that are more restrictive than us. So St. Paul, Minneapolis, Duluth, Lakeville, Bloomington, Roseville, St. Cloud, all of them allow 2 a.m. licenses within their ordinances. I can go further. I can say Brooklyn Park. I can say St. Louis. All of those places allow for 2 a.m. liquor licenses. Some of the places that don't is Winona and Austin. So Winona is an interesting case because it is a college town with a lot of history. And one of the things that I gathered was they are also a little bit more concentrated in terms of where all of their bars are. Whereas Rochester, geographically, we are also very spread out. And so the opportunity to make more money in a shorter period of time and the demand for making more money, because again, they do have a very vibrant college town, is greater in Winona than it possibly is in Rochester. And so some of our businesses do want that extra time to get more money as opposed to what might exist in Winona. And then Austin just never signed on to extending for 2 a.m. liquor licenses. And so those are just two examples. And that's, again, that's certainly a policy decision that could be made by a city council, a cultural decision that could be made by a city council. But I just wanted to give kind of the balance of the two. And then just as a kind of quick,
Ms. Kirkpatrick, Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
Should I wait?
no, by all means.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So when you go back to slide 14, then these other cities that are allowing the 2 a.m. that have, I guess, similar or perhaps significantly larger populations than we do,
Mhm.
how does their staffing of, emergency responders, RPD, or police departments stack up to ours? Are they more heavily staffed and they can meet the potential, I don't know, let's call it a burden of these added things that are coming in between 1 and 3 a.m. and we're just not necessarily staffed for that? Or is it the geographical base that we have, or is there any data on that?
I don't have concrete data on that, but I can get you that information if you wish. My preliminary conversations with them have been, though, that their economic and their staffing varies greatly. Like the staffing that's in St. Cloud is very different to the staffing that's in Minneapolis in terms of their RPD responses, but their actual strategies for each of these, I have not gone into detail to see if there's commonality between them, which is something that I can certainly do.
I think that would be really helpful, actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councilmember Dennis?
Yeah, so I appreciate you comparing other similar sized communities. One of the huge concerns I have from hearing about tragedies on the highway when it comes to communities that are very close to a city that has different end times. When one city ends, there is increased, this is what I've from experience, from not experience, but from like looking at statistics, there is well, I shouldn't even quote the statistics, I guess, but people who have necessarily a bar that closes at 1 a.m. in a certain town, and it's a easy drivable distance to another town that has a 2 a.m. closure, and DUI situations that happen because of that. How about the communities that are right around Rochester? What are their liquor license? When do they close their bars? Because I think that would be more of a issue if you're looking at someone who's, like, oh, the bars all close at 1 a.m. in Rochester. Let's just move,
The Stewartville,
yeah,
for
right.
example.
Yeah,
Or Byron.
Thank you.
You. I don't have that data in front of me. I can grab that data for you, but I do not know what the times are for Byron or Stewartville.
Okay, yeah, I think that. Okay, and I guess I'm a little bit more too, but the impact on, I was reading the mayor, she sent, the mayor is not confined by open meeting law, so she can send the entire city council emails. And she said, my hope was, in kind of initiating this conversation, was to move closing hours back to 1 a.m. with the idea that nothing good happens after midnight. And then she goes on in her email about, reasons and stuff about, but these 8 particular businesses, I mean, what is the, I don't know, issues with those, because we have lived experience with those 8 with law enforcement interactions. Those 8 have there been increased issues? Because I feel like if someone's going to drink, they're going to drink, they're going to cause issues no matter where. I mean, not that they're going to cause issues, but they're going to go somewhere else to a private residence or something. So is there an issue with those 8 businesses particularly that we have experience with?
I think that I don't know if issue is the right word. I think that just the fact of the matter is that they are just bars that are serving alcohol later. And even within the 8, they are not consistently all serving between 1 and 2 a.m. For example, some of them just have the license for when they want to use it for certain events, right? Like Crave, for example, will have a 2 a.m. license because during the summer months, sometimes after Thursdays on 1st, they want to have events that last until 2 a.m. New Year's, they may want to have an event that is happening, or New Year's Eve, I should say. The Mayo Civic Center may have events that happen periodically that run until 2 a.m. And they want to have that particular option. Same thing with Rochester Galaxy Cinema. There may be a Dune screening or an extremely popular movie that comes out, and they want to offer alcohol late into the night because they are having exclusive and special screenings. Those are slightly different, for example, than businesses whose business models are primarily about the sale of liquor, for example, Elsie's Venue or Kathy's or Workshop Bar or North Star Bar. Within their very titles, they exist as bars for that particular operation. They came to Rochester with an understanding and a belief that they would be able to exist and have those operations until that particular time. And to your point, Councilmember Dennis, if a person does want to drink, they will drink. But the question and the discussion here for the council is again about a policy and a directional decision for the culture of the city of Rochester in terms of, do we want to allow or enable that? And that's really not a discussion or a decision, I should say, for the office of the city clerk to make. We can present you with the information. That's a decision for the council to make, and then we could bring this back for possibly a public hearing or for a report and recommendation. And we can have a more robust conversation about that, where we have all of the relevant entities that would be even more effective and who could represent themselves far better than I to present to you, whether that is owners of those individual bars as well as representatives from the police department, or we could continue just right here, just answering questions, and you can make the decision about whether or not you just want to keep it as is.
Okay, thank you. And then I just two more quick. Would kind of piggybacking off of Councilmember Kirkpatrick's talk about like liability, does the city have any liability having a longer time frame? Connect, like you're talking about how, you know, entities can go backward and say which entity served the alcohol, and then could it go back onto the city? Well, the city allowed that to be the, you know, bar to be open. It can't bring back liability
No,
onto the city.
It's a statutory allowance. We're not operating outside of the ambit of the law. We are no more liable for people that are serving at 1:30 p.m. than we are for people that are serving at 9:30.
Okay, wonderful. And then to read off of the mayor's email one more time, she wanted a discussion about the special late night permits. So is that something that, I guess I'm, you know, like if people wanted to just have the, you know, to whatever AM at a certain, I mean, how easy is that to get and how expensive comparable to just purchasing the licensure?
Sure. So there's a couple of late night permits, I suppose, that I want to speak to then. So the 2 a.m. license is statutorily constrained for how much it can cost, which is, off the top of my head, I believe it's $200. Because it's just for that additional hour. We cannot charge more for that, similar to Sunday licenses. That's within state law. And so there's no way that we could increase the fee to make it either, you know, to incentivize or de-incentivize people from doing it. However, there are also other special permits that typically do go hand in hand with that licensure from time to time. So a general entertainment endorsement, for example, is where we allow for late night dancing. So if you think about possibly, for example, the Workshop Bar and even Elsie's Venue, they sometimes allow for dancing that occurs late into the evening, so after 10 o'clock p.m. And that could go on until 1:30. That particular endorsement does have a $2,000 price tag. And the idea for that is it goes hand in hand with us looking deeply into their security plan, looking deeply into the 2 a.m. licensure, and making sure that all of their processes are vetted. Because again, when you start adding these elements to the process, you do add additional security considerations that we as the city want to make sure you have considered before we grant you your licensure. It's one thing to be at a bar and consuming alcohol until 2 a.m., which in and of itself, obviously, we have our concerns with, as you've all expressed here. But then it's another thing to add on top of that, dancing, jostling, interacting with one another, where there could be, you know, physical touch, et cetera, tempers could get inflamed, et cetera. We want to make sure that full consideration is made and that you are serious about the process that you are going to engage in, and there's a monetary cost for that. So that, I imagine, would also be part of the late night permitting that the mayor would have been alluding to in her email.
Councilmember Palmer.
One quick question. I got a bunch of questions, but a quick one. Isn't the movie theater closed?
Rochester Galaxy Cinema
They're the ones in Northwest, correct?
Are we thinking Paragon? Sorry,
That's the south one, it's Marcus Theater.
that's close or that, Rochester Galaxy is, yes, thank you. Rochester Galaxy is, and that's the legal name. It's, yeah, I'm talking about Marcus Cinema's the one that's up there in the south.
You're talking about the one in the south?
I'm talking about the one south.
Okay.
Mhm.
The names, I thought the name was the one that was in Northwest.
Go back.
Marcus is on south.
Yep, right. Yep, so
Galaxy 14 is.
Galaxy, so are you thinking Paragon?
I'm reading the top list here. So
Yep.
Galaxy 14.
Right, so the one in the northwest that we might be thinking about is, let me think, Cinemagic? Yeah, that's no,
CMX Chateau is the north one. The one that closed was the Cinemagic.
thank you,
Galaxy 14
is Marcus Theater, yeah.
Since we got the police chief, could we have the police chief come up and ask him a question?
Absolutely.
Chief, if you don't mind.
Here, sir. Yes, sir.
Your team is the ones that have to deal with people after 1 o'clock, and is your recommendation, or would you have thought that after 1 makes sense, or?
Yeah, so I'll echo Christiane's comments. This is really kind of a council decision reflecting policy, reflecting your priorities of, you know, what do we want our downtown to look like? Obviously in the vein of vibrancy and downtown. In reference to our business, you saw a lot of statistics there. I think a lot of those statistics will still be there even if there is a 1 o'clock close. I think that activity, post-bar activity is going to be there whether it's at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. So from an operational standpoint, would we gain something? We'd gain an hour less of perhaps compressed time frame that people can consume additional alcohol. And that may have a small impact on the amount of activity. To answer a little bit of Councilmember Dennis's question here, I can't think of or pinpoint any one particular bar that we have a issue with or call any one particular bar out. But what I can say is the issues that we have in downtown area are density issues. And it's simply just a matter of kind of managing the density of people leaving bar close at the same time, whether that's 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. I think the issues will still probably be there. And as far as how we respond and post for overtime, we post for overtime in 4-hour blocks. So as far as there wouldn't there may be a small net gain in the amount of overtime that we post, but it won't be. But we still have to post in those 4-hour blocks, which would still cover kind of that same 1 o'clock time or 2 o'clock time frame, if that makes sense.
So traveling to outlying cities, I know I've read about Winona where their closing's at 1, but you can go across the river to Wisconsin until 2. I don't know if we'd want to encourage people to do that. Do you know if we have that problem that people would go to a surrounding city or county that?
Speaking to the drinking habits of the community, I can't, sir. What I can tell you is we certainly do see an influx of people that come into the downtown within those last hours for whatever reason. I don't know why, but we do see kind of that influx into the city here. Again, that's just something that we manage in order to manage that. Obviously, we enact our safe zone initiative during the summertime, which I think I've spoken to before to the council here. In addition to that, we do have a Friday, Saturday overtime detail where we post to specifically deal with kind of bar closed downtown issues during the summer hours, as you saw, because that's data-driven peak time hours for us and when we're dealing with those issues. If that answers that.
It doesn't. And my last question for you would be, do you want them concentrated downtown or do you want them spread through the whole city so you're chasing all over?
I think whatever you guys decide, it's my job to perform and manage and just meet expectations. So again, I believe this is a council decision. Whichever way you want it, the police department will step up and respond appropriately and make sure that we keep this community as safe as we possibly can.
Thank you for that answer.
Can I ask you one question while you're still up here? So Christiane mentioned that you don't proactively talk about if there's a concerning bar or there's a lot going on that we'd need to reconsider their license. But I assume that if there is a lot going on and you're concerned about their security plan, that those conversations do happen.
Yeah, and I stand before you to, having not dissected all of the data that was presented here, to you. So what I'm telling you is I can't think of a bar that jumps out as a chronic problem
Right.
for us, obviously.
But if there were one,
I
that would
think
be addressed.
We would be talking about that
Okay.
internally in the command staff. Now, if that is occurring with some of my captains internally, that may be occurring, and wouldn't maybe necessarily rise to my level.
Okay,
But I think there's, yeah, leave it at that.
okay.
Thanks.
Can I finish up with two other questions with?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yep. The numbers you're telling us like 30% or 25%, are those self-reported or is it somehow audited that we know that that's?
Those are self-reported.
And then you said the downtown area, what do you consider the downtown area?
I would consider it basically anything that's kind of in that special service district. So it would be inclusive of, I would cut off, if we were going to list the bars here, I'd probably cut off like North Star Bar, but I would include, say, the Mayo Civic Center in there. I'd include Kathy's in there. I'd include Crave Restaurant in there. I would include Elsie's Venue in there. So that's a significant portion of our 2 a.m. licenses that would be in what I call the downtown area. And then we get obviously kind of a little bit outside with like Workshop and North Star Bar, and then a little bit further out with Corona's Tacos, and then further out yet still with Rochester Galaxy 14.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your help.
No problem. And then again, just to kind of reiterate with what the chief said, which is when we have truly problematic bars, those conversations do happen. But
Yeah.
if we are talking about cost of doing business things, which is the trespasses, the drunken disorderlies, et cetera, and you aren't necessarily laying that entirely at the feet of the bar itself, it's just kind of part of, operating a bar late at night, then our office at least does not get that information from the police department, because I would imagine that in their eyes, it hasn't yet risen to a level where punitive action needs to be taken. Because if it's coming across our desks, that's usually what the next step is.
Councilmember Keen has a question too, but one question about just the timing of this. You mentioned we can just keep on keeping on, or
Mhm.
there could be a different policy decision made. Can we have it made at the beginning of 2025? Is this timing critical
I mean,
or?
it would, the truth of the matter is, it would have to be made at the start of 2025, because we would have to amend the ordinance. So just
But
from
it doesn't
just,
need to happen before 2025.
no,
Just kicking the can on that one. Councilmember Keen, go
Yeah,
ahead.
just to respond to that though, I mean, it makes no sense for us to be operating as if this is an emergency.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into exactly why it's on our agenda today, but I guess I do appreciate the clerk's office saying this is more of a policy discussion. I appreciate you bringing in that there is a law enforcement aspect.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you did bring in, or the idea of the hospitality or the Chamber of Commerce or Experience Rochester, how they would weigh in on this. Would they view this as, it's a public safety thing and this should be done as with those sort of facts in front of us? Or is there an impact on Rochester as a destination for a convention, or for, as a hospitality thing? This is a good thing we have that, or it's neutral? Or do you think there's other opinions in the community about that?
So I think that's a great point that you brought up, Councilmember Keenan. I have not reached out to the DMC board or entities there. I reached out to all of our licensees, and I reached out to the entities that are directly impacted by it. And I can certainly come back again also with that information and with the information that the council members have asked of me. My feeling is that we would be slightly disadvantaged if we were to move back 1 hour. We are in competition with other municipalities for venues, for events, for a whole host of things. And if part of our intent as an entity, and I'm not trying to make policy recommendations to you, but is to continue to be a place for destination and to diversify our economy, then that is one of the things that we also want to consider in terms of what does that look like? What does activities look like downtown, both earlier on in the evening and later on in the evening? And not just downtown, but obviously all throughout the community itself.
Good.
I think that's a really important point, just as we think about what we hear in our community and concerns about lack of opportunity and options already. I don't know if I'd be comfortable making this sort of change, although I do appreciate the mayor's concerns, but Ms. Elms, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Keen, Deputy City Clerk Cartwright, get the titles right. I do think the other thing that might come up is that the most recent changes to liquor licensing and increases of liquor licensing fees across the board also support additional, in particular, additional downtown presence of police officers. And so that might come up as a concern. If you were to change this, I don't know that it would, but it is something to be thinking about relative to that was one of the reasons, and it is one of the things that's funded with the increase in liquor license fees that happened about 5 years ago.
That's correct.
Thanks for that
Yep.
clarification.
No, thank you. And we, at the time, we did actually, and again, I know this merges and mulls over time, but we did add downtown foot patrols and things like that for late nights, and we tried to address some of that stuff. And frankly, in the time from that to now, we actually had a great lull in our downtown where we basically lost the downtown business. And some of it, I know Councilmember Palmer sort of implies this, but it was not a good thing to have it move to the outlying areas and some of that. That was it kind of caused more problem. Now, I'm not trying to, I don't address this as it's just a problem. To me, it's a, one of these, volatile situations that creates a lot of value for a lot of people and a lot of entertainment value, and it has problems. So I am concerned with, and again, I don't want to speak against the mayor. I think you could take the policy set that we're the city for health and we should be, doing all we can to not have that kind of stuff. But I think that really flies in the face of some of our, doing business in Rochester and trying to draw business to Rochester and being the police towards us saying like, no, everybody should go home. Let's change it to midnight. I looked at that national map, and to me, there's some key things jumping off that. I mean, if you are in the Utahs, you are basically saying, if you come here, these are our rules. And Minnesota and other places, we're much more like the rest of the country. We're not like, if you picture Las Vegas and then you look at New Orleans, they're trying to say, no, come here. This is the party capital. And we're not in those sort of things. I think we're in the right place. I think we're a larger city. And if we are out competing like our experience Rochester is to draw these things in, I mean, I don't think people look and say, oh, they're only open till 1, but I think it is something that we start handicapping ourselves from being able to draw those things in. And I have policy concerns with doing that just based on police impacts, because like Chief Franklin says, it's hard to look at those things and say, oh, good, we'll change this and those will go away. They might move earlier, later, somewhere. I don't feel we can control those. But I also do have insight that people sit out in some of the outlying areas and say, hey, it's 11 o'clock. Let's go downtown because that's where all the people are. And there's something fun about that. And I'm not sure if we're here trying to say, nope, it's a little bit too much fun. We ought to dissuade that. I'm going to take a little more time before I start saying we need to hollow this back. The other point I want to make is that there's something else happening here that's changed too. We talk about this as bar time, but we have a new entity that's starting up with these sort of LC Place, and it's not really a bar per se. And it's the same thing with Crave. What they're doing is they're not Crave restaurants staying open late. They're a different entity. They're using their space differently. And I think we have done something with the 2 o'clock license where we've checked to make sure the neighbors aren't in trouble. We've gone through it with our police. We've kind of gone through this, and we have a fairly stringent thing to get those licenses. And now I think though, to look at those and say, nope, that's been a mistake. I would have some concerns with that.
Thanks for those comments. Councilmember Bransford and then Kirk.
Well, I think Councilmember Keen addressed a lot of what I wanted to say, but I want to reiterate the fact that if the police chief is there saying, it's really not going to change much, it's in, and we're going to have a negative economic impact, why, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? So if those problems are going to occur anyway, more or less, and we're degrading, the fun factor of downtown, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Thanks. Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
I agree with you, Mr. Keen, like 100%. And I wish there was something we could suggest to businesses, not necessarily mandate, but give points or discounts, or I don't know what it would look like, but something that says, hey, if you do this also on a Friday or a Saturday night, you can get more people here, because I just keep hearing that the fun factor isn't high enough here. And as you say, yeah, it's fun to go down. I love to go downtown. I kind of live down here. It's awesome. I don't ever get out to the suburbs very much. And that's the cool thing. Let's go downtown. But if all that it's about is just drinking, it's like, where's the dancing? My gosh, I'd never get off the dance floor if they'd play until 2 a.m. It's awesome. If Incognito played like every weekend, I'd be there, right? So is there a way we can encourage these liquor venues to also offer more activities that aren't necessarily tied to alcohol, but tied to social community type of things? Because as you know, Chief Franklin got up here and said, I guess it's our decision, and I appreciate the feedback, but I also appreciate the element they bring to, supplying so much public safety to our community, and the work that they do to do that, and the safety concerns they have to take on to manage some of our more, rogue populations that we have now and then. So, like me, and there's late night dancing.
Yeah.
Was that, did you want me to?
Do
Okay.
you want to comment?
No.
Yeah.
So that was a question, a very long-winded question. But is there a way we can encourage some of those other, like, you can also drink while you're doing this, but it's not about grab a beer to go play pool, grab a beer to play darts, grab a pool and watch the bingo. It's other things that go along with that. I know Thursdays is intense. I know roller skating was intense. I know social ice is great, but it's not just about the drinking. So how can we encourage our bars to have those kinds of activities too, that bring more community together and bring more people downtown? And
What I've seen in the time that I've been working on licenses is the reality of the situation, unfortunately, Councilmember Kirkpatrick, is it's market factors. Clubs did terribly. Pre-COVID, during COVID, post-COVID, and they've not recovered. There still remains, it seems to me, a common thread of people not quite socializing within that level of close proximity and constraints. I'm just using your dancing example. I'm sure that there are possibly other much more clever venues and ideas that people could do late at night. There's nothing that necessarily prohibits it. Part of the reason, as I said earlier, about the price tag for the dancing was just because it just does come with increased associated risks. It just does. More often than not, even though drinking comes with its own risks, in terms of behavior, sitting down at a bar and drinking, you are less likely to engage in mischief than if you start to dance and peacocking starts to become a whole thing. So that's peacocking.
Maybe.
It's basically essentially showing off. So that's just a fundamental factor, I think, that a lot of businesses consider. And then they have to build a dance floor. They have to have the actual infrastructure that's part of it, and deal with all of those associated things as well. And financially, it doesn't always necessarily pay off for them. And so I think if the city is not incentivizing it, and my understanding is we don't usually put our thumbs on the scale of, free market and private enterprises, then the pathway towards that really self-selects just for those few businesses that want to roll the die. You've made a very good point about or maybe it was you, Councilmember Keene, about LT's venue doing something that was interesting and Crave doing something that was interesting. The other point about 2 a.m. licensure is my office typically gets calls from businesses from time to time that are looking or are exploring options about where they might want to open next. And one of the questions that we often field is, do we allow 2 a.m. licenses? And sometimes that has actually been a kind of final decision that's pushed 1 or 2 businesses actually to open in the city of Rochester, because it is a significant financial consideration for these businesses.
Great. Any other discussion?
Just as a follow-up, this got on our, near the end of the year, got on our study session. Is there a next step based on this, or is there just, we're just gathering information and we'll see where we go to next?
I await kind of direction from the council. So what would you like for the office of the city clerk to do next?
Nothing. That's my.
I am not comfortable being involved in any changes before my term is up.
I appreciate that just as a normal hygiene thing, we look at these sort of things on a regular basis and see if we're getting out of control. But I would need more convincing that changes need to happen, and this is what they're doing. I appreciate, I think what the mayor is trying to do is look out for the police workforce, but I also think, and again, I wish you were here to speak for herself, but she does have that concern with, is this reflective of the city for health? And I think there is, that sort of thing is something we can concern with. My concern here is more that hospitality industry, that sort of RDA, what we're doing to activate our downtown, and then we turn around and do something like this, which will be perceived as the exact opposite, and that concerns me.
And I would second that. Even though I said, could we get more data after hearing Chief Franklin speak and hearing about the changes, and I don't think it would be economically good to move it back any earlier. I think 2 a.m. But the same thing is, this is something that you can bring back in a few months when the new council comes.
Okay.
Ms. Dennis?
Okay. Yeah, I find it interesting that we're having this study session with the person who wanted it not able to attend. So, but I do feel that, supporting businesses and looking at the information brought by the police department, I don't see a need for a change in investing any staff time on doing any kind of changes.
But thank you for the detailed overview. Thank you to the police team for being here and appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Zelms, I'll turn it over to you for this remaining study session of the year.
Thank you, Council President, council members. We do have our last study session of the year on the 25th of November. A couple items there is the feedback from this year's National Community Survey. So we will have the team that we contracted with as well, and also the team that worked on this from the city, able to provide information and answer any questions you might have. A brief update on the Planning to Succeed comprehensive plan update that's been going on. It was delayed a little bit, as you may recall, but that is now underway. So a brief update there, an update from our teammates in fire and community development, as well as finance on the fire service contract that you've heard about, as well as Olmsted County General Plan, General Land Use Plan changes, just so you have a little bit more information about that. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you. We will see everybody on Monday.
So I definitely won't be coming on the 18th or the 25th.
Recording stopped.